Alright. Can you check if I'm streaming?
Huh?
Can you check if I'm streaming?
I can check if you're streaming or not. It didn't take me to the sign-in. Like the, I expected like the whatchamacallit, duo pump because it's SSO sign-in. Where the? Oh, these. Okay, let's see. I think it should be live. I see something.
Can you hear me? Is the question.
I
Hello.
heard sound too, so.
Hello, folks.
I was gonna say like.
Okay, they can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Wait, let me see.
Oh, ew, my voice. Alright.
That's a yes.
If y'all haven't signed in, please sign in. Or you can use this link. It's a beautiful link. Okay, you guys all signed in. Okay. Welcome to the pen testing workshop. Where we'll go over pen testing. Okay. So say that again?
Brought a fancy fountain pen. Are we testing that?
No. Okay, so what will you get from this workshop? We will not be testing physical pens. Yeah, sorry about the clickbait. At the end of this workshop, you will not know everything about pen testing, probably. You will not be able to hack into the Pentagon, probably. And you will probably not be ready for a job at the NSA. Probably, unless you're really smart. In that case, why are you here? Anyways, why are you here? Well, you will gain a basic understanding of the penetration testing process. You will gain some exposure to some different tools and methodologies. You will gain exposure to my own method, which may be different from yours in the future. So my hope is that from this presentation, you'll see some cool things that you like, that'll turn into an interest, and eventually turn to a passion where you start self-learning. And then that drive becomes a passion, and you continue on your self-learning journey. And then you get arrested for hacking the Pentagon. Don't snitch on me. I'm seem very sick. Okay, some basic requirements that I did mention on the Discord. It'd be nice if you had a TryHackMe account. TryHackMe is a fantastic website for learning some basic pen testing and some other things. It will hold your hand, have some tutorials. It doesn't annually blast you like Hack the Box does. And it would also be nice to have Kali Linux or any distro that has Nmap, GoBuster, Netcat, and also Google. Please know how to use Google. And some Linux knowledge would be nice to have, and security in general. So what exactly is pen testing, aka penetration testing or ethical hacking? Well, long story short, it's just a test on system security defenses. So it's a simulated attack on target resources. Why do I say simulated? Aren't we actually attacking it? Well, yes, but the difference between you and a malicious hacker, or at least I hope the difference between you and a malicious hacker are two main things: intent and extent. So when you're pen testing a system, your end goal is really to try to strengthen the security of the target. But when you're a malicious hacker, which hopefully you're not, you're trying for a completely different goal, like money or some sort of espionage. And also extent. Once you breach a system in pen testing, well, you kind of just stop there. Maybe you try to poke around, exfiltrate some data, but you don't really, destroy anything. But for extent, for a malicious hacker, either you can destroy the system, but a lot of them will just sit in the background and continue stealing your data until you somehow find them. Okay, so here are the necessary legality, ethics, and other boring stuff. I feel like I kind of have to go over this, or else I get in trouble. So don't do stupid things, basically. So don't attack anything you don't have permission to. Don't attack critical infrastructure What I mean is don't DDoS the system. Like, yes, they say to hack it, but not destroy the entire server. Phishing is usually out of scope for a pen test because they don't want you poking around their employees. Usually phishing tests, if they exist, will be conducted by an internal team. And for pen tests, there are these things called rules of engagement, which is basically like a list of things that you are allowed to do, a list of things you're not allowed to do, as well as some resources that you are allowed to attack, like IP ranges, subnets, specific regions. I'll also tell you the allowed attacks, and I put reverse engineering here because a lot of companies do not want you reverse engineering their code. So reverse engineering is kind of lame. Don't do that. Okay, so here are some 10 commandments of computer ethics that some nerd wrote back in the 90s. Basically says don't do bad things. That's probably good life advice, but especially for pen testing. Any questions? Beans. Okay, so the basic phases of a penetration test. So this is not really set in stone. Some people will say there's more phases, some people will say there's less. It doesn't really matter. You all get the same end goal. So the phases are setup and reconnaissance, where you're trying to gather as much information about actually touching the system or engaging with it. Discovery, there's two types, I would say, scanning and enumeration. Pretty self-explanatory. Enumeration would be repeating some action over and over again. And then you get to the fun part, as people would say, exploitation, where you actually gain a foothold in the system. So after you gain your initial foothold in the system, we have a step known as post-exploitation or privilege escalation. So if you manage to compromise a user in the system, well, chances are that user is pretty useless. You can't really do much. So what you want to do is get higher privileges. So you want to be like an admin where you can actually do fun stuff. And finally, the most boring part, documentation and reporting. Yes, it's not particularly fun, but it is also very important. Reading freeze. Okay, so the setup and reconnaissance phase. This is the first phase. You want to carefully read your rules of engagement. That tells you exactly what IP addresses are in scope, what kind of attack you are actually allowed to perform. Usually, if you're just doing a little challenge, you're not going to have like a whole list of engagement. You just grab an IP address and then go. But there's still some other steps in setup and reconnaissance that can help you later on. So in this stage, you start by finding some publicly available information. You want to start poking around online to see what kind of other information there is out there. So basically gathering as much information without actually touching the system itself. Some great tools for this are Google. Like you see here, you Google how to hack Roblox and bam, you don't even need to touch any systems. And also Webalizer. I always read that as Web Appalizer. For example, I don't have that on the system. Actually, I don't even have my virtual machine booted up. Okay, give me a second. So for an actual pen test, you also want to look at information about past breaches, maybe what kind of areas they are especially vulnerable to. What the? You have it just here. Give me a second to boot up my VM. Any questions so far? You.
What's the purpose of using a virtual machine to?
Yeah. So for me personally, it's a compartmentalization issue. I like to keep my hacking stuff separate from my school stuff. But the actual answer would be if you're actually attacking something malicious, you might download malicious files, right? You don't want that on your main system. So a virtual machine provides containerization, so all the bad things happen only in your virtual machine and they don't touch your main hardware. So that would be the main reason. Also, I'm running Windows because I want to run Windows, and I don't want to use Linux daily because of compatibility issues. Yes?
So, okay, so setup is like research, right?
Yeah.
So, could you run by me again what you're supposed to research?
Okay, let's say, for example, I don't have a vulnerable website, but let's go to utdallas.edu. And I'll go to UTDallas. It's here. So in actual pen test, some of the information you might be looking for are like people who work in that location. I mean, usually phishing is out of scope, but even if you find the name of people who work there, they might be potential usernames, right? If most companies, they follow a convention for usernames, it's just first initial, last name. And so if you look at people who work there, bam, you have a list of potential usernames that you can try. I will show you this. Might be something cooler. I go to utdallas.edu. Wappalizer, fun name, is a extension that you can install. And this basically just tells you what kind of tech stack the website you're on uses. So we can see here, obviously, UTDallas uses WordPress because we don't have any good computer science people. Just kidding. No offense. Number of websites. Name of website. You guys suck. YouTube.com. Alright, Wappalizer tells us nothing because YouTube actually hides everything, unlike UTD. Name something that's not as Wikipedia, maybe? Gee, that's not very helpful. The UTD of the south, of the north. IT. Okay, they don't really tell us either. So basically, UTD doesn't like to hide their information. They want to give everyone their information. Fantastic. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, it's kind of sad. So you can see earlier that UTD was using WordPress, right? So sometimes, especially in older websites, you might see that a lot of WordPress websites explicitly say made with WordPress 4.2, blah, 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 something like that. If it's an old version, you can kind of just Google that and find a vulnerability like, I don't know, WordPress 4.20 for no particular reason. Sure. And you can see, like, basically, oh, this is not very good. You can see right here, basically every version of WordPress they update, there's going to be some vulnerability, right? You got to keep your applications updated or else you're going to die. And WordPress has a crap ton of plugins, so those all come with their own vulnerabilities there. Yes.
So what you're saying is we shouldn't use WordPress.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying if you use WordPress, you should keep it updated, which is good advice for anything you use. WordPress actually isn't that bad. I don't know why everyone hates it. All right. So in the next phase, vulnerability discovery and enumeration. So in this phase, we're trying to, the end goal is kind of to gather as much information about as many potential attack vectors as you can. And an attack vector is just one way you can attack a system, or one way it might be vulnerable. So we're trying to build up sort of a threat map of what components in the system may be vulnerable and how those components might interact with each other. So most common ways to do this, basically intelligence gathering, but actually engaging with the system. We have port scanning, basically scanning a system or a network and seeing what ports are open and what services may be running on those ports. Most popular tools for this are Nmap, Masscan, and Ruscan. Not really sure why Ruscan exists, to be honest, but most of the time you'll just use Nmap because it's the best. Masscan, I've used it before for like huge network scans, but when you're just doing network scanning for your one machine, then you really don't need Masscan. And Nmap, I would say, is the most reliable. It's been in development for way longer than any of the other options. If you haven't heard of Nmap, here's the man page. Nmap. network exploration tool and security/port scanner, blah, 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 blah. It just scans a bunch of ports. So here's an example. What do I scan? I'll scan my own website. That's not actually hosted by me, so I don't know if I should be scanning this. It's pretty simple. Type in Nmap, and you put in an IP address or a host name, and it'll scan it. Hopefully. Internet. Might have internet. Oh, I do have internet. You can see right here, just port 4 for free is open, which is HTTPS, a web server. If you want to play around, there's a website specifically for Nmap playtesting. Scanme.nmap.org. Let's scan that too for fun. I don't see you following along.
I don't have a lot.
It doesn't take this long. It's cool. A machine, because each one could be a potential attack target. Like this computer. Okay, along with port scanning, we have another type of enumeration, which is directory enumeration. So you guys know how on a website is basically just a file system. So a file system has directories and files inside it, but are you okay?
No, it's just my computer was being weird.
Oh, okay. But you don't necessarily know exactly what folders and files are on the server. But if you do directory enumeration, basically what this does is it has a word list of a bunch of potential or common directory names or file names. You plug that into one of these tools, Go Buster, Derb, and however you pronounce that last one. Fuff. You plug that in there and it tries all of them against the web server and uses, like, I believe, response codes to tell whether it's actually existing. Maybe I can demo that too. If anything works today. Oh, I got this computer on. Okay, I'm not going to demo that. Basically, you can find hidden, quote-unquote hidden directories. And let's see, I don't know if this is really enumeration, but you can also put in some list of usernames or passwords, try to brute force a couple of those, see if any of them work. Okay, now to the fun part, I suppose. So in this phase, we use the information that we gathered from the first two phases to try to gain a foothold in the system. So all the work we did previously was not useless. So this involves usually trying to gain a shell, a reverse shell, or some login credentials to gain a foothold in the system. Some random tools that you might use are Metasploit, Netcat, and Beef. Beef is like, what are you doing? Beef is like web browser exploitation framework or something. I never used it, but it sounds funny. So once you have some potential login credentials, they're most likely to be hashed because people hash passwords. If they don't, then you can kind of skip everything and just destroy it. So some tools for cracking password hashes are John the Ripper and Hashcat. And these are really the only two I've ever seen being used. You don't really need anything else. Questions? So when you start, I feel like this one is pretty accurate. When you start, a lot of it is going to be like script kiddie stuff, right? You're just going to be looking up vulnerabilities, copying other people's exploits. But I would say at the beginning, it's really good fundamental knowledge to know before you start writing your own exploits to use other people's exploits and how you might structure their code. So yes, everyone's a script kiddie at one point. Questions? Oh god, yeah.
Okay, okay. So, well, explore is like when you mess with a website.
Well, the primary goal is to try to log into the system because the most dangerous vulnerability is remote code execution. And what better way to do that by getting a shell in there? Right, if I get a shell in your computer, I can do whatever I want. But it doesn't always have to be exploitation. It can be more like, more espionage, like exfiltrating data, trying to leak data without having to actually execute code on the server. There are multiple ways. Oh yeah, so I mentioned a reverse shell. And no one asked me what a reverse shell is, so I'm assuming y'all know what a reverse shell is? Why didn't you ask?
I guess.
Okay, so you guys know what a normal shell is? When you like SSH into a system, you make a connection and they have a listening server or listening process, and you connect to it and it executes a shell. And that's what we call a bind connection. A reverse shell is basically the same thing, but reversed. So instead of you connecting to the victim sends a connection to a listening process on your computer, and you can execute code from your computer. And the reason this is so common and useful is because, well, firewalls are usually set up to block incoming connection because that's what's most dangerous, right? You want to block the outsiders from coming in, but no one ever thinks about the insiders coming out. Okay, some do, but it's much less common to have like outbound firewall rules. I can maybe show a demo if this computer works. Let's see. Be quick. Okay, so let's say these are two separate computers. Maybe this is the server. Oh god. This is the server. And this is the client. So in a regular shell, you'd have the server running a process like this. Netcat listen on port 444. And when you connect to it, it'll run bin shell. Is it not the connect? Oh yeah, it's listening on port 4444. So let's say you're the client, you connect to the netcat process. This is locally, so it's just 127.0.0.1 on port 4444. And you see we have a connection, and you can do stuff, right? But in a reverse shell, you have your listening process on your local machine. So do 4444, and your computer is listening on port 4444. And what you want to do is get a payload onto the host server, or the server, that makes an outbound connection to your computer, which is listening on port 4444. I just use that because it's a common port, apparently. So, let's see. P4444, and you want to execute SSH. Let's listen. And you can see on the client, the server connected to us, and we can run the same commands we did. All right. Questions? Comments? Encouragement? Thank you.
This picture would be better.
Yeah, I thought it'd be better. Oh god,
Yeah.
my bad. That's a terrible picture. But basically, here arrow goes left, here arrow goes right. That clears it up. Okay, so after you gain your initial logins or your permissions in the system, you want to extend your privileges. Right, because if you log in as your everyday dumb intern, well, he's probably not going to have much permissions, right? So what you want to do, there are two types of permission extending, I guess, or privesc. There's horizontal, where you kind of assume another user that's sort of on the same similar level, but slightly different. And more importantly, there's vertical movement, where you're trying to gain higher permissions, right? So for example, Henry the intern, you can pivot from Henry the intern to the CEO. This is not really realistic because CEOs don't have accounts usually. It'd be like a sysadmin or something. You can run a lot more commands than you would be able to do as Henry the intern. So your end goal is try to escalate to root. If you're not familiar, root is like the super user in Linux that can do everything. And it can do a lot of things that are protected from regular users because you don't want regular users to have admin process or admin permission to everything. Like, for example, in Windows, whenever you install stuff, they say like, oh, do you agree to like do this, blah, 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 and you click yes. Same thing. So in this phase, you also want to find what kind of data can be exfiltrated from privileged and non-privileged standpoints. So for example, if you hack a random intern and they can leak client passwords, well, that's terrible, obviously. But if you hack the CEO, this is all, you're not really going to hack CEOs, most likely, unless it's a startup and you're just mean. So if you hack a CEO and they leak passwords, that's slightly more understandable, right? Because why would an intern have access to stuff like user passwords, stuff like that, confidential information, maybe PII, personally identifiable information. And here you can also see what kind of other machines could be compromised. There's something known as pivoting, which if you compromise one machine, this machine is just one of many in the entire network. So you can go from this machine to jump around places in the network until you find the supercomputer. It's not actually a supercomputer, but like the domain controller, which has a lot more access than your random world server. And how do you do this? Well, mostly on Linux, there's something called linps, which stands for Lineage Privilege Escalation Automated Script. I didn't actually know that. Basically, it's a command you can run. It'll see what kind of privilege escalation methods are available on that server you're running. So usually these will be like SUID misconfigurations. SUID is a bit set on a program that basically allows you to run that program as a root user. This is necessary for a lot of programs like password, ping, because ping needs special permissions to send those packets. But if you misconfigure those on the wrong application, that could be very bad, right? And I would say the number one vulnerability, if you've ever worked in real life, is outdated applications. No one wants to update, but if you don't update, you will get hacked. Questions? Hold on. Yes?
So what are you saying? How the attacker got into Henry interns was like the reverse shell thing, and he like guessed the password?
There are a lot of different ways you can get into a system. I'm not going to list all of them because that could be a whole talk by itself. But let's say for this example, Henry the intern was dumb and he set a crappy password, thus allowing you to crack his password and log in as Henry the intern. For example, hypothetically, in this random company with this random CEO. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. I also had another question.
Yeah.
So what was the inspiration for these?
Oh, just random. Like, I literally just put stuff in a random number generator and then got numbers. Okay.
I present that diagram.
I don't know what. Oh, is your name Henry?
It's a common name. Oh, it's a very common name.
Okay, and the final step, documentation and reporting. Yeah, for most people it is a snooze fest, but speaking from experience, you will thank yourself for writing good documentation later. Like, there are only so many ways. No problem, Henry. There are only so many ways that a system can be exploited. Very soon you'll find one, you're like, oh, didn't I do this a couple days ago? And you look back and, well, if you have nothing, you'll be mad at your past self. But if you have some stuff, it'll save you a lot of time. So actual reports, you're probably not going to write an actual report for every machine that you get into when you're like playing around, because that takes a lot of time. But in the real world, if you ever get to be an actual pen tester, you will have to write reports, and these reports are long. So they contain information such as methodology, like how you actually breach the system, the specific vulnerability, the severity. Industry standard is the CVSS system. It's basically a way to weight risk versus severity, right? So if something is severe but it's incredibly hard to perform, well, that would be a lower priority than something that was easy to perform and high severity, right? And also, you will also see a lot of remediations and recommendations. Depends on who pen tests you. Some companies, honestly, they just put your IPs in a vulnerability scanner and then give you the results of the vulnerability scanner. So that's not very Gucci of them. But if you actually have good penetration testers, they'll actually take the time to, really try to attack your system rather than just putting it into. Oh, did I not go over vulnerability scanners? Oh, I just skipped this. Oh, anyways, going back a little, we also have vulnerability scanners. This basically uses signatures to compare like the services running on a specific server or web server. And this only looks for existing vulnerabilities. So this will look for vulnerabilities in like outdated applications, right? Every application has a signature, and you compare it against your database to see if that signature or that version is an old version that could be compromised. So the results of this are mostly just low-hanging fruit. If you go to an actual system, you're not really going to see any results from a vulnerability scanner because, well, any noob can run a vulnerability scanner. You don't really have to do anything. You just put in some IPs, right? But for your initial starting, it might give you some hints. All right. Any questions about documentation/reporting? Good, great, actually. Oh, some useful frameworks and databases. One of them I really like is MITRE framework. So that was a bunch of steps that I just went over, and you might be like, oh, where do I start? What do I do? I'm stuck. Well, MITRE is here to save the day. So MITRE attack is basically an attack framework that has a bunch of different steps, a bunch of different attack vectors that you can try. So if you ever get stuck and you're like, and need some inspiration, I would take a look at this. Oh, we have OWASP for, what is OWASP? Web security, right? Application security as well. And we have the NVD, National Vulnerability Database. So pretty much any big vulnerability that exists will be on here or will be reported on here. For example, we can see this was November 10th. That's 2 days ago. Beeline Smartbox was vulnerable. Let's say you got in the system, it has Beeline Smartbox version 2.0.38. Well, you can see you could probably hack it. But that's why you should always keep your application updated, because when companies see their product has a vulnerability like this, they will work their ass off to fix it. Please update your programs. And your own documentation, like I said earlier, there's only so many ways something can get hacked. Look at your own documentation. If you get stuck, look at what you did in the past. Good help.
I have a question.
Yes.
So I would assume that you also keep a documentation.
No, I do not. Do as I say, not as I do. I mean, I have some basic ones, but I'm lazy. Alright, so now we'll move on to a quick demo. We'll be going through this room on TryHackMe called Root Me. And the goal is to root me, the server, at least. Like I said earlier, a room is basically like a series of challenges. It's a machine that you want to basically hack into. So we can start off by starting this machine. Oh, why does this take a minute? I will never know. Oh, it's starting. That's why. Any questions? I don't know how you'd have questions about this, but comments? I can enumerate the directory now.
I don't know if you all.
Okay, unless you steal my computer from me, I don't think there's much you can do. let that run for fun. Okay, so our machine is up. So we have our IP address here. We can just go ahead and grab that. This is the machine that we will be web browser. Oh, right. I'm stupid. Okay, so since this server is owned by them, you will need to connect to your own VPN in order to be on the same network as that computer. Otherwise, you won't be able to reach it. This to prevent you from like attacking my computer, as in my target. Okay, so now we have our VPN running. By the way, if you're not running as root, you probably would have to do sudo openvpn and then the VPN file. I run as root because I like to live dangerously. Alright. Now if you refresh this, we will get nothing again. You can see there is a web server, but there's literally nothing here. Boring. Alright. How do we get started? Well, let's see. We go to the slides. Phase are we in right now? Setup and content. Like I said, you don't really do much if you're just doing your own hobby stuff. You just grab your IP and go. But this phase is super important. So let's start with a port scan. If you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand. Get to eventually, maybe. Let's start with a port scan of the system. So Nmap. You can see that fine, right? Cool. Oh god, this is big. Nmap. Let's see. Oh, I forgot there's actually a room that we're supposed to be going through. Yes, we completed this step. First, let's get information about the target. Scan the machine, how many ports are open. Obviously, we have to do some port scanning. And the way you do that is just Nmap, pastes in. Nmap, pastes in, I said. And some useful flags for Nmap would be capital A. If we look at what capital A does. Basically, it's a macro that has a bunch of different functionalities combined in it. Enable OS detection, version detection, script scanning, blah, 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 blah. So it'll give you a lot of good info, essentially. Map with the IP address and then capital A, and we can dump the output to a file called scan.nmap, I guess. Before we do that, make a directory. Right, and then run this. Usually it doesn't take too long, unless my computer wanted to die again. Any questions about this? Pretty simple so far, I think. Are you yawning? Oh, speaking of which, we have our results. So I'm just going to open up that file we just created. Okay, so what are we supposed to do? Scan the machine. How many ports are open? If we look at the output, I don't think you have to be a rocket scientist to see that here's the port that we have. 2 of them. What ports are open? Oh, you're so smart. Okay, so we can see how many ports are open. 2 ports are open. What version of Apache is running? Apache is a web server. It will be on port 80. And we can see if we look and use our eyeballs, it's running Apache version 2.4.29. So we can just copy and paste that. What service is running on port 22? Anyone know?
FTP.
Close. So we have a couple columns. Can someone tell me what service is running? SSH. Woo! Find directories on the web server using the GoBuster tool. What's GoBuster? I don't know what GoBuster is. Well, if you type in GoBuster, it'll tell you the usage. Let's see. We're looking for hidden directories. So we can see if you type dir, it'll use directory / file enumeration mode. It sounds like what we want. GoBuster dir. Pretend I don't have a huge string over there. Alright, so some flags. Does it not have the U flag here? That's kind of useless. Basically, you use U to specify the URL. You're attacking URL. Put in the name, your target. I'll copy and paste it again. And W specifies a word list. This is basically a big list of words that it'll run against the server to see if any directories match it. And on Kali, your list of words will be here. Word list, and this one we kind of just pick a random one. Let's go Thereabouts, sure. And then directory list, this small one, because why not? And we can use /t for threads, basically to make it faster. Lots of threads. You can see there is a folder called uploads. Okay, well this just gives us the directory structure, which is not very secure of them. CSS, yes, JS, that sounds pretty standard. But we also have this panel. Panel. What is panel? I've never seen panel. And if you go to panel, it's a file upload form. Well, that's kind of strange. Well, it turns out that that's actually the hidden directory. Hidden. Not very hidden, to be honest. Type panel. Oh, we completed this. Submit. Any questions on that? We basically got a list of words, and then we spammed it against the server to see if one of those words was a directory. Makes sense, right? Yes.
I already know one thing.
And what's the alternative?
I don't know, like upload or something.
That's well, you can try uploads, but it's not the same number of letters. Technically, I guess they're both hidden, but this is the hidden one, the super hidden one. Any other questions? Well, and we can just kill this because there's not going to be anything else. Alright, now that we finished our reconnaissance shell, we're going to try to get a shell. Find a form to upload and get a reverse shell and find the flag. You guys remember what a reverse shell is? You don't? Okay. Basically, a reverse shell is when... Have you heard of SSH? Yeah, you connect to a server, right? Basically, in a reverse shell, you want the server to connect to you. So you have... Okay, cool. It's a shell, but reversed. Alright, so how are you going to find a reverse shell? Well, like I said, a pen tester's greatest tool is Google. So we're going to look up... What is this? Reverse shell. blah blah blah. Where are all the reverse shells? Pentest Monkey, that's a pretty good website. And we can see here, there's a bunch of reverse shells available. The most common one you'll probably use is a PHP one, because a lot of websites run on PHP. Let's actually go to PHP reverse shell. It's easier to download. Alright, you can see here we have the code for reverse shell in PHP here. We go to raw, and we can download this wget. We have the reverse shell here. Some modification will have been made here. If we open up the reverse shell, we can see usage, blah 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 blah, and change this and change this. So this is basically the IP that the server will be connecting back to. So what is the server connecting back to? Your own computer. So here you would put your own IP address. You can get that through IPA. Does that work? Oh, sick. Here. Address. Let's see. Delete this. And here you put your own IP address because you want the server to connect to this, which is your computer. And what port you want the server to connect on. I'm just going to change it to 4444 because why not? Alright, I'll change it to, I hate Vim. Okay. I didn't say that. Oh my god, okay. We'll change it to 6666. Whatever works, right? Well, now that we have a reverse shell, how do we get it on the server? Well, what is this? It's a file upload form. Let's try uploading our reverse shell. So this is just one of the methods you can get. Basically, you want to run code on the remote server, right? How are you going to do that here? You can't connect to the server. Well, good thing they gave you a file upload form. So let's upload this file. What the heck? PHP not a permitido. I think that means PHP not permitted. So a lot of websites will look at your file extension and they can detect that, well, this is a PHP file. Why are you uploading a PHP file? This is supposed to be for images like JPEG. So they will blacklist specific PHP extensions. What do we do now? Anyone know? Google. PHP file upload block. Sure. Okay, I don't have good Googling skills. But basically, this server specifically looks at the .php extension, and we look at PHP file extensions. For some reason, maybe someone would know, PHP actually has a crap ton of file extensions for no particular reason. Oh, I guess old. Makes sense. So, we can get around the file name blacklist, or file extension name blacklist by maybe renaming it. Let's try the first one here. And they could like block multiple versions. I don't know why P4, 3, 4, and 5 exist in S, but let's just try the first one. So let's rename this reverse shell from .php to .phtml. And you can see it's the same file. It still works. It's still PHP. It just has a different file extension. And maybe it'll work. Perhaps. Upload. Oh my god. O arquivo foi upado com sucesso. That probably means success. It is green. Green is usually good. It'd be funny if they reverse that though. Okay. Well, we just uploaded a form. What do you do now? Where's that form? You don't know? Anyone know what that form is? Well, we uploaded a form. Maybe it's in the directory called uploads that we found earlier using the same tool, GoBuster. And we can see right here, php.vershell.phtml. What is that? That's the file we just uploaded, right? Okay, so like I said, for a Vershell, you do have to have a listening network or listening netcat connection on your computer. So we'll just listen and I don't think you need that verbose and P to specify the port. So we'll listen on port 6666. And we can see we're listening here. Alright, and once we click this, what's up? Nothing's happening. No? Oh, what is this? What does this look like? It's a shell! We can verify this is a shell by typing some commands and it'll give us the correct output. Go hide. I'm in a shell. I just realized I totally forgot about this website here. Oh, I did not. Upload and get a reverse shell and find the flag. Okay, so now that we have a reverse shell, we can basically execute whatever commands we want on the system. Pretty cool. Pretty dangerous. So we're looking for a file called user.txt. So what you could do is look in every single directory and see if there's a file called user.txt. But if you're like me and you don't want to spend 12 years doing that, there's a handy command in Linux called find. So find takes in the directory to look in. We'll look in the root directory, basically every file in the system. We'll specify how we're going to look for that file by name and the parameter for that. So what was it, user.txt? I was going to do that later. Oh my god, there's so much output. How are we supposed to find the correct output? Well, in Linux you can do a handy thing. And redirect, this is all errors, right? We don't have permission to do this because we're not the root user. But we don't really care, right? Because the question assumes that the base user that we logged in as will have permission to it. So we know it's not one of these directories. So we can type the same command, name user.txt, but this time we redirect standard error to null, which is basically the void. It disappears. And bam, much cleaner output that we can actually read. So we can see there's a file called user.txt in var/www. Let's just cat that out. We got our first flag. You got a shell. We didn't get a shell. Cool. So we just finished logging as one user. Next step is privileged escalation. Any questions so far? Could I have used grep? Yes, if you like list every single file recursively and then grep for it. Yeah.
If you have to look for it, you can use grep. But we didn't know the contents.
You could grep for the file name, I think is what you were saying.
Oh, from the find results?
From like list recursive or something.
Yeah, I was saying for the find.
Yeah, but find is kind of like a convenient macro, almost. It combines the functionality into one thing.
That seems kind of shallow.
How would you do it then? Okay, use. Oh my god. Thanks. Okay, so well, this shell is not very stable. So once you press Control C, it doesn't just exit the current command, it exits the entire shell. So in order in order to,
Listen to me.
I was showing them a lesson. So in order to regain our reverse shell, just click it again. Wow, magic. Alright. I'm not gonna control C again. Yes, you could probably use grep somehow, but find is what a lot of people use because it's more, what's the word, intuitive, in my opinion.
Should do cat dev random.
I'm good. Now that we have our shell, let's.
I think that's the way that you get the password for root.
Is it? Let me try it. Anyways.
Maybe it's a new random. W random.
Maybe next time. On your computer.
What about HW random?
Okay, now that we have a shell, let's escalate our privileges to roots.
Yeah, maybe.
You can see if we type ID, or who am I, we're just dummies, or this is just used for like, I don't know, managing a server. It doesn't really have many permissions. So we want to escalate our privileges to root. First step, it gives a nice hint. Search for files with SUID permission. Which file is weird? That's a great hint. Do you guys know how to search for a file with SUID permission? No?
Let's go to the main page.
Like Henry said, let's Google it. Search for search for files with SUID permission. We can see the syntax is fine. Directory on LinkedIn. The flag is /perm, and then your input permissions. How to find files of SUID set in Linux. We use the magic Control-C, Control-V, or Control-Shift-V here. And find. Right, that doesn't give us useful things. Let's redirect standard error to null again. Okay. So these are the files that have the SUID bit set. It is a big list, but we can see that some of these do actually need it to be set in order to function, like change shell, password. Can you guys see anything in here that doesn't look like it should have permissions? Weird. Python. Why does Python need to run as root?
Super Python.
It's super Python. And super dangerous. Alright, so did I just kill that? I don't know what happened there. I did just kill that, okay. So now that we know that we can run Python as root, what do we do? Well,
random?
No, we do not do that. If you don't know what to do, basically, Python can execute as root. We're trying to be root. So how about we run Python and somehow escape Python and become root? Yes! If you don't know what you said, let's see, Python privilege escalation. Pretty easy thing to Google for. There is a lot of Googling. Welcome to computer science, freshman. Alright, so we can see GTFO bins is a good source for a bunch of different privilege escalation methods, or ways to exploit SUID misconfigurations. Python, there's C probably. Oh, that's the one. Go. Like, go? Go. Where did that go? Fine, I know that has one. Okay, so like I said, we have Python. It can be used to break out from restricted environments by spawning an interactive system shell. You guys can all read Python, right? This is basically just passing a command, an argument to Python. It says import the OS package, and from OS run system and run the shell. So let me show you what it looked like. I did it normally. Python import os.system bin/sh. Look at that, it's a shell. How cool is that? Did you know you could do that? You got it. Okay. So, we're not using reverse shell or file upload, file download, file write. SUID. If the binary has the SUID bit set, it does not drop the elevated privileges and may be abused to access the file system, escalate privileges, blah 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 blah. If it is used to run shsp, omit the HP argument. Basically, this. What is this doing? It's running Python, passing this argument to it. Import os, os.execl. This is basically just system, but with our arguments. And running shell with a -p flag, which I'm pretty sure was that like inherit permissions from its parent, which is what we want. Now we go back to our reverse shell and dump that in there. You guys understand how this works? Python isn't the most complicated, but I can explain if anyone needs to. We'll run it. Nothing happened. Is this broken? No, it's not. If you look at ID or who am I? We're magically root. What happened? Well, we ran Python and then we escaped the Python by running a shell within Python. And then we inherited our parent's permissions, which was root. Since the SUID bit was set, whenever you run it, you inherit the permissions of the owner, which was root. Everyone got that? Any questions? We just did some magic here.
So like we're in a shell.
Yeah. You never seen that? Look at this. I'm in a shell, within a shell, within a shell, within a shell. Actually, that's pretty cool. Tell me. LVL? One. What is this?
Maybe batch. Okay.
Oh, does it only count distinct ones? Let's see. Oh, no, it doesn't. SH is weird, I guess. Okay, so we can see that we are now a root. So we have successfully escalated our privileges. Yeah, back here, user-bin/python. Pretty sure that's what it was. Cool. Find a form to escalate your privileges. We did that. And root.txt. Well, where are we? I killed it. Let me get that back. Because I killed it earlier by pressing Control D a bunch of times. Let's see. Grab our IP address. We have an hour and a half left. Okay. Next back, we run this Python escape command, and we are root again. Alright, so now that we're root, what can we do? Well, in this case, it's pretty simple. We go to the root home directory. We can see there's a file called root.txt. If you couldn't find it, use the same command we did earlier. Name root.txt redirects it out to dev null. You can see it's right here. flag, THM, privilege escalation in leak speak. Put that in then. Woo! We completed the room. I love this confetti. So that's kind of the end of the demo. You guys have any questions on that part? Concerns? Yeah. I would say this is incredibly easy. I mean, you can Google everything, right? I don't think I made any huge leaps in logic. Did I? Even easier than this? Probably you just log in and then you're root. I would say this one's pretty. It might seem hard if you've never seen this stuff before, but trust me, it's not too bad. I don't even know. I'm not. I would say this is one of the easier ones I've seen. I'm not exactly an expert, but the challenging ones, those are kind of like frustrating, I would say, because you try so many things and then most of them just don't work. So you have to try. Like this case, we kind of just tried one thing and it worked, right? Because it gave us a bunch of hints. But in the harder ones, it would just be like, print this file, print this other file, and that's the whole challenge. Right? Like this one held our hand, right? We knew what to Google. It was like upload and get a reverse shell. That's a big hit right there. All right, so, but trust me, like if you play around for more, it gets a lot more intuitive. Like maybe that seemed like magic, but it is. It is about practice. Yeah, that's it for our demo. The slides. Where? Because when I made my account, I named it Jerry Tang 01 because I was unoriginal, and now I regret it. And they don't let you change your account name, so now I have to email it, and that's too much work. Huh? The subscription on this one. Yeah. Or I could just tell them to change my name. At that point, I'll do it eventually. I don't really like having my name there. Frameworks.
You could also just change your IRL name to be like, this is a pseudonym.
Oh, technically that's not my legal name. Did you know? My name's not Jerry. I don't think any of you know my real name.
I know your name.
I didn't point at you. Alright, if you guys want to gain some more experience, there's this very good resource, very good room here called Basic Pen Testing. We have this beautiful man, John Hammond, here who will walk you through it if you need to, but basically you get exposure to a bunch of different, let's see, like Go Buster, brute forcing of Hydra, password cracking, great stuff, good intro, beautiful man. Alright. And there's a ton of good rooms. Speaking of good rooms, if you are interested in this, which I hope you are, after my great presentation, TryAcme is probably like the #1 resource that I recommend to people nowadays. It's how I got started in all of this. It starts off very intro. Like, yeah, I would say there are easier rooms than this. This one is a challenge room, right? But they have teaching or learning rooms where you literally don't have to do anything. You just like type out the commands they tell you to, right? But you build up those brain cells over time. So you can learn and then you practice. And they have these things called tracks, which is basically like guided learning, I suppose. For example, pre-security teaches you a bunch of basics. I did 90% of this because I don't want to do Windows. Like Linux fundamentals, how websites work, network fundamentals. This one's kind of useless, but you see my point. Like it's a good resource. And a lot of these are free, but not all of them. And the ones that aren't, you will need a subscription. Those are like $10 a month, so really not that bad. Another resource, once you get a little bit more into it, is Hack the Box. Hack the Box, I would say, is harder than TryAcme. It doesn't really hold your hand, though I think they are coming out with like new content for students and stuff, but it's still developing. I would recommend TryAcme first and then move to Hack the Box. Vuln Hub, basically just a website that has a bunch of vulnerable servers. If you want to download an image and spawn it locally and then attack it without having to rely on someone else's servers. And then these are just random things. HackerOne. This is a bug bounty platform, so basically, I can log in. Not too much work. Basically, companies will hold bug bounties. So if you can find a vulnerability in their website, they'll pay you. You can actually get money like practicing as well. Well, most likely you won't find one, but it's still good practice. You can make a couple bucks here and there, or a couple hundred. The biggest I've seen is like a couple thousand. Actually, they did give like 1 million for this one Microsoft one. Yeah, I saw on LinkedIn. This one Indian lady is like, my dream has been achieved.
Yeah, only 1 million.
Yeah, for finding a bug. I mean, obviously, it was a big bug, right? Like high risk, high severity. Awesome. Okay, that's pretty much it. Any questions here? Okay. Yeah, maybe I can find it. $1 million bug bounty. This teenager got $1 million bug bounty on HackerOne. Santiago Lopez. A common thing you'll see with a lot of hackers is they're all self-taught. So you need the passion. They don't really teach us in school. You need the passion, and then from there you can go anywhere you want. Right? There's infinite resources online. Indian woman, $1 million bounty. I think. Oh, this one's only 30K. Claim. Scamming. Okay, maybe you guys can find it, or maybe I was just lying to you guys. So yeah, that's pretty much the end of the presentation. Let me stop streaming.